The wind cut through the early morning air like glass, sharp and bitter, carrying with it the faint smell of charred timber and forgotten memories. At the edge of Marrow Street, where life had once bustled behind white picket fences and porch swings, now stood a house stripped of its soul, burned to its bones, silent, hollow. The brick skeleton that remained loomed against the pale sky, its scorched beams clawing into the air like the fingers of a ghost still begging for help. Ground was dusted in soot, the grass long dead, and scattered debris rustled faintly with every passing gust. But amidst the ruin, something stirred, a small golden figure pressed against the edge of what was once the front porch. He was barely more than fur and bones. A street dog, at least that's what people assumed, but those who'd been around long enough knew he wasn't always wild. His fur, once likely soft and bright, was now dirty and matted, tinged with gray ash that never quite came off. His ribs showed through his sides with every breath, and his eyes, oh, those eyes carried a weight too deep for a creature who couldn't speak. A torn ear drooped slightly, and an old limp in his back leg made him shift uncomfortably every time he moved. Yet despite his frailty, he held his ground like a soldier at the gates. He didn't beg. He didn't bark. He just watched. Day after day, week after week, he stayed in that same spot. Locals had come to recognize him, some calling him Ash, not just for the coat he now wore, but for what he protected. He didn't wander far. He didn't play like the other strays. He had a purpose etched deep into his heart, a duty he would not abandon. His gaze was fixed on the ruins of the house as if, at any moment, something or someone might re-emerge from the ashes. People couldn't understand it. They had heard of loyal dogs, yes, but this this was different. It wasn't hunger. That kept him tethered to that ground. It was something sacred, something heartbreaking. The house had burned down nearly 2 months earlier. The story had made the local papers briefly before the news cycle moved on. A tragic electrical fire, they said. A young single mother named Emily and her daughter Lily were inside when it started. Firefighters had tried, God knows they tried. But the flames had moved too quickly. By the time they reached the second floor, it was too late. Emily had been found curled protectively around her child's small body beneath a collapsed beam. The only one who had survived the fire was the family's dog, this dog. Toby, as the neighbors had remembered. But Toby had changed. The joy that once lit up his eyes was gone, replaced with a haunted stillness. No one could bring him in. Animal control came twice. The first time with cages and treats, trying to lure him with soft voices. He wouldn't budge. The second time with guns. But the volunteers had been met with such fierce resistance, not aggression, just raw, terrified grief that they couldn't follow through. One officer swore he saw Toby run into the ruins and whine at the blackened staircase, nudging a scorched piece of fabric with his nose before collapsing beside it, shivering. After that, no one tried to remove him again. People started leaving food. A retired teacher brought fresh water every evening. A young woman from the bakery brought leftover rolls at dawn. A group of kids even placed a blanket on the ground near him once, hoping he'd take some comfort. He never accepted any of it while people were there. Only after they left would he cautiously, carefully step forward and eat, always in silence, never straying far. The blanket remained untouched, dusted over with ash and time. One morning, a delivery driver named Carla parked her rusty blue van across the street. She'd been watching him for weeks now. It had become part of her routine: drop off a bowl of warm broth, set a few slices of chicken next to it, and whisper a quiet goodbye. She walked slowly, careful not to startle him, her boots crunching on the frost-covered gravel. Toby Ash lifted his head slightly but didn't move. His eyes met hers just for a moment. There was no fear, just quiet acceptance. I brought "Your favorite today," Carla murmured, placing the bowl gently on the ground several feet away from the ruins. She looked at the charred remnants behind him and exhaled slowly. "I don't know what you're holding on to, sweetheart, but I hope it gives you peace." Ash said nothing, of course. He never did. But his tail gave the faintest twitch, as if acknowledging the kindness. Carla stood for a while, her arms wrapped around herself as she looked at the house. A few icicles hung from the remains of the roof, swaying slightly in the wind. The front steps were nothing but blackened cement, leading nowhere now. It was hard to believe that once there had been laughter here. A little girl's giggle, a mother's humming in the kitchen, the barking of a dog during a game of fetch in the yard. Ash remained still as Carla returned to her van and drove away. Only once her van disappeared around the corner did he move slowly, like an old man rising from memory. He stepped toward the bowl and sniffed it, then began to eat, chewing carefully. When he finished, he walked back to the exact same spot, the scorched concrete where the porch once stood. He lay down, head resting on his paws, eyes watching the window frame that no longer had glass. And he waited. It wasn't just loyalty. It wasn't just grief. Toby had seen something no one else had felt, the love of a family who took him in when he was just a trembling puppy left on the street. Emily had found him in the rain, wrapped in a dish towel, barely breathing. She'd fed him with a bottle. Lily had called him her guardian angel. And now, in the silence left behind, he was doing what angels do, watching over the ones he'd loved, even when they were gone. The sun began to rise, casting light on the ruins and the lone dog standing sentinel. The wind carried a whisper through the broken walls, a whisper of laughter, of bedtime stories, of sticky kisses and muddy paws. But it was gone now. Only Toby remained, and in his heart, the fire still burned. Before the silence, before the soot and the smoke, that house on Marrow Street was alive. It breathed laughter through its windows, music through its walls, and love through every creak in its wooden floors. That was the place where a woman named Emily lived, a 34-year-old single mother with wild brown curls, paint-stained jeans, and eyes that smiled even when her heart felt tired. She worked long hours as a freelance illustrator, often taking commissions late into the night while her daughter Lily sat at the kitchen table with her crayons, mimicking her mother's art with big loops and bright colors. Their little house was never perfect. There were always dishes in the sink, toys on the stairs, and laundry half folded on the couch, but it was warm. It was alive. And at the heart of that home was a dog named Toby. Toby hadn't always had a name. Emily had found him during a thunderstorm 2 years earlier while running errands with a then 6-year-old Lily. It had been raining sideways that day, the kind of storm that made the sky look angry and confused. As they drove through the supermarket parking lot, Lily had suddenly screamed, "Mommy, stop the car," and pointed. There, under a broken shopping cart, was a soggy ball of fur that barely looked alive. Emily hesitated for only a second before pulling over and rushing out with her jacket. The puppy, tiny, trembling, and soaked to the bone, didn't resist as she scooped him up. He just looked at her with big wet eyes, as if too tired to even be afraid. They took him home and wrapped him in towels. Lily named him Toby after her favorite book character, a brave little dog who helped people in trouble. At first, Emily wasn't sure she could keep him. Money was tight, and a pet was a big responsibility, but watching the way Lily clung to him, how her giggles filled the house again after weeks of quiet spells since her father had walked out, Emily made a choice. Toby would stay. And from that day forward, he became more than a pet. He was a piece of their puzzle, their protector, their friend. Toby grew quickly, his golden coat thickening, his legs lengthening. He followed Lily everywhere, up the stairs, into the bathroom, even trying to sneak into the schoolyard once. At night, he curled up at the foot of her bed, and when she had nightmares, He was the first to hear her cry. He'd nudge her arm gently and whimper until she settled, then lay beside her like a warm blanket with a heartbeat. Emily swore he had a sixth sense about their moods. When Emily felt overwhelmed, Toby would rest his head in her lap and look up at her with eyes that said, "You're not alone." He was a dog, yes, but also a quiet guardian who held that little family together with invisible threads of loyalty. They had a routine. Every morning, Emily would make breakfast while Lily fed Toby. He'd get one scrambled egg and a slice of toast, his favorite. They'd all walk to the school bus stop together, and Toby would sit by the curb, watching Lily climb aboard. He never barked or pulled. He just waited until the bus turned the corner, then trotted home beside Emily. In the afternoons, the ritual was reversed. Lily would come bounding off the bus and into Toby's waiting pause. Sometimes she'd tell him about her day like he was her best friend, and honestly, he was. He listened better than most kids and never interrupted. His silence made her feel heard. On weekends, the three of them would have adventure days. They'd pack peanut butter sandwiches, a thermos of juice, and dog treats and head to the nearby creek. Lily would collect shiny rocks while Toby splashed through the shallow water, his ears flopping wildly as he chased leaves and dragonflies. Emily would sketch quietly, catching the way the sunlight caught her daughter's curls or the curve of Toby's tail as he leapt after something unseen. It was simple. It was imperfect. But it was everything. And then one night, everything changed. It started with the smell of something strange, faint at first, then stronger. Emily had been finishing a commission in her upstairs studio while Lily read in bed. Toby had been lying at the door, as usual, his head on his paws. He was the first to notice something was wrong. He stood suddenly, ears up, nose twitching. Then he growled. A low, uncertain rumble. Emily paused, confused, until she noticed the faint haze in the hallway. Smoke, thick and gray, curling up the walls like fingers. She ran down the hall into Lily's room, grabbing her daughter as the alarms began to scream. "Stay close," she yelled, but Lily was coughing already, eyes wide with fear. The staircase was already aflame. Toby barked and ran ahead, circling back to herd them toward the small window in the laundry room. It was barely wide enough, but they had no choice. Emily helped Lily through first, then turned back to find Toby barking at the growing flames. He darted toward the bedroom, grabbing something Lily stuffed rabbit, then ran back. Emily reached for him, calling his name, but just as he leapt toward the window, part of the ceiling gave way. The last thing Emily saw was his eyes full of panic, full of love. The next moment, everything was heat and noise. And then, nothing. When firefighters arrived, they found Emily and Lily collapsed near the back porch. Lily's small hand was still clutching the rabbit Toby had rescued. She hadn't made it. Emily was still breathing, barely. She would later succumb to the smoke in the hospital, never knowing that Toby had made it out. Somehow he had scrambled through the broken window after them, his body burned and scraped, but alive. He had been found by a neighbor, shivering and bloodied, barking at the door of the ambulance, trying to climb in. But when they wouldn't let him follow, he ran, disappeared into the night. 3 days later, he returned to the house. And he never left. Now 2 months later, that same dog once known as Toby, now just a whisper of himself sat guard among the ruins. To everyone else, it was just a burned house. But to him, it was sacred ground, a place where love had lived, where laughter once echoed, where a little girl had whispered secrets into his ears and fallen asleep with her hand on his paw. And though the world had moved on, Toby had not. He couldn't, he wouldn't, because what he had lost could not be replaced. Not with food, not with a new home, not even with time. He stayed because love doesn't vanish with the smoke dot, it lingers in the ash. The seasons had begun to shift. Late winter melted slowly into early spring, though the nights still carried a chill that clung to bone and breath. The charred frame of the house remained unchanged, black beams like broken ribs pointing skyward, windows still empty like hollow eyes. Time may have passed for the rest of the world, but here it seemed to stand still, and so did he. Toby, though most people now only knew him as Ash, remained faithful to the ruins, never straying far. He still slept beside the cracked front. Steps still waited each morning with eyes turned toward a house that would never come back. Locals continued to leave food and water, their quiet offerings placed respectfully at a distance, never attempting to touch him. Some took pictures, some wept, some prayed. But Toby remained silent, as if afraid any sound might break the last fragile thread connecting him to the past. But then, one day, she came. Her name was Mia. She was 10 years old, with thick glasses. Too large for her face, a notebook clutched tightly to her chest, and a red backpack covered in hand-drawn stickers. She'd recently moved to town with her father, who had taken a teaching job at the local middle school. Their new home was just 2 blocks from the burned house, and each morning, Mia passed the ruins on her way to school. At first, she'd simply glance at it in silence like the other children did. They all knew the story, the fire, the family, the dog. It was the kind of story that got whispered in sleepovers and over cafeteria lunches, always ending with wide eyes and the words, "He's still there." But Mia was different. She didn't believe in letting sad stories stay sad forever. One morning, as she rounded the corner to Marrow Street, she spotted the dog sitting in his usual place. He looked so still, like a statue carved from grief. Something about his posture made her stop walking. She stood for a moment, just watching him. Then, almost without thinking, she sat down on the sidewalk across from him, opened her notebook, and began to draw. She wasn't an expert artist, but she liked the way drawing made her feel like she could understand things better when she turned them into lines and shapes. She sketched the house, what was left of it, the slanted roof, the skeletal porch. Then she drew the dog, careful with his eyes, his fur, his heavy heart. Toby noticed her, of course. He lifted his head, ears twitching, tail curling slightly. She was different. She didn't bring food or make any sudden moves. She just sat and scribbled, glancing up every few moments, her brow furrowed with concentration. When she finished, she carefully tore the page from her notebook, folded it in half, and placed it near the sidewalk's edge. Then she stood, adjusted her backpack, and walked off toward school without a word. After she left, Toby remained still for a while. But as the street quieted, he cautiously limped forward, nose twitching. He sniffed the paper, then nudged it, open with his snout. There he was, drawn in soft pencil lines, sitting just as he was now. But beside him, Mia had drawn a little girl. She held his paw. She was smiling. Toby didn't understand the image, not fully. But something in him stirred, a memory, a whisper of warmth. He gently pawed at the page before settling beside it and curling up, nose pressed close to the drawing. The next day, Mia returned. Again, she sat quietly and began to sketch. This time, she brought crayons. She colored the drawing in as birds chirped nearby. Toby watched her with cautious eyes, not getting up, but not looking away either. When she finished, she folded the paper and placed it beside the first. It was another drawing of him, this time with a house behind him. Not the burned one, a new one. And again the little girl was there, smiling, holding his leash. Underneath, Mia had written in shaky cursive, "You're not alone." This became their ritual. Every morning for 2 weeks, Mia stopped by the house. She never tried to touch Toby. She never spoke. but she always drew. Sometimes it was just Toby. Other times it was scenes of him running through meadows or sleeping. In the sunshine, one picture showed him licking an ice cream cone while children laughed. Each image was left at the same spot. And over time, something remarkable happened. Toby began to wait for her. He'd rise a little earlier, stretch, and sit near the sidewalk, watching the corner where she'd appear. His tail began to thump softly when he saw her, just once or twice. And one morning, as she sat drawing a picture of Toby and a little girl planting flowers together, he limped closer than ever before, just a few feet away. Mia's hand trembled, but she kept drawing, her heart pounding. She didn't want to scare him. When she finally looked up, Toby was staring at her, not in fear, but in curiosity. In recognition, very slowly, she set her crayon down and slid the finished picture toward him. Toby sniffed it, then did something Mia didn't expect. He sat beside it, right beside her. For the first time, Mia's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't move, afraid even breathing might ruin the moment. She just let him sit. They stayed like that until the school bell rang in the distance. And then, just as gently as he had come, Toby rose and returned to his post by the porch. But something had shifted. News of the little girl and the dog began to spread. One of the neighbors had seen it, snapped a photo, and posted it online. "The dog who guards the burned house now has a friend," the caption read. People began watching from a distance, touched by the connection. And slowly, subtly, Toby began to change. He started eating more regularly, even licking the bowl clean. He began walking farther from the ruins during the day, exploring nearby streets. His limp remained, but there was more purpose in his steps. And every morning, like clockwork, he waited for Mia. If she was late, he paced. If she missed a day, he howled softly, the sound carrying like a mournful echo through the empty house. Mia's father noticed too. One evening, he sat beside her as she finished another drawing, a picture of Toby sleeping peacefully in a garden, surrounded by butterflies. He looked at the pile of sketches she had made and asked, "Why do you keep doing this, sweetheart?" Mia looked up and smiled softly. Because he remembers someone he loved, and maybe, if he sees what love can look like again, he won't be so sad. Her father didn't say anything. He just hugged her close and kissed the top of her head. That night, as the wind whispered through the burned beams, Toby lay curled beside Mia's latest drawing. The moonlight lit up the page, reflecting in his eyes. And for the first time in weeks, he closed them, not in grief but in rest, because maybe, just maybe, someone still saw him. And maybe, just maybe, someone still cared. The sky had begun to soften with the first blush of spring. Pale sunlight filtered through the thinning trees along Marrow Street, and for the first time in months, birds sang above the house that had forgotten how to breathe. The ruins remained unchanged, blackened walls, broken beams, scorched foundations that still seemed to pulse with memories. But something within the scene had shifted. Not in the house itself, but in the presence that guarded it. The dog who had once barely moved, who had refused to eat while people watched, who had laid like stone on the porch that no longer was, he had begun to stir, to shift, to stretch toward the light. Toby, though few knew him by that name anymore, had begun to live again. Each morning now, he waited not just with stillness, but with quiet anticipation. His ears perked at the sound of sneakers against pavement. His tail thudded softly against the dirt. And when Mia came small, gentle, always with her backpack and notebook, he met her halfway. They didn't speak, not in the way most people would understand, but they had their language. A crayon placed just right. A glance held a second too long, a tail wag, a soft smile. These moments built something sacred between them and invisible. bridge of trust stitched together with patience and silent understanding. One Friday morning, the air was warmer than usual. Toby had already begun his routine, limping to the edge of the lot, scanning the sidewalk. But Mia didn't come. He waited. Minutes passed, then an hour, and then another. The bowl of water sat untouched. The sketchbook page from the day before, which had depicted Toby curled beside a blooming cherry blossom tree, fluttered slightly in the breeze. Still, no Mia. He paced, back and forth, ears turning at every distant sound. Occasionally, he would bark a low, confused sound toward the corner where she always appeared. But no backpack, no bright smile. Just the sun slowly rising over Broken Brick Dot. By midday, Toby stood at the sidewalk, unmoving. His eyes watched every passing car. A few neighbors noticed his posture was different, tense, anxious, not like the silent vigil they had come to know. The mailman, who had seen Toby nearly every day for months, paused and called out softly, "Looking for your girl, boy?" Toby didn't move. He only stared past him, into the street, ears twitching. That afternoon, a car pulled up to the curb. It was older, its engine coughing before it cut out. A man stepped out, tall, tired-looking, with salt in his beard and worry etched across his forehead. He wore a gray sweater and carried something in his hands. It was Mia's sketchbook. And in his other hand, her red backpack. Toby's head lifted instantly. His body stiffened, tail lowered. He didn't bark, but he watched closely as the man approached the edge of the ruins. The man knelt carefully, setting the sketchbook and backpack on the ground. His eyes were red. "She's okay," he said gently, his voice cracking. "She had an asthma attack this morning. She's in the hospital now. She asked me to tell you, said you'd worry." Toby tilted his head. He stepped forward slowly, sniffing the backpack. His body relaxed just slightly, as if recognizing the scent. The man watched him for a long moment, then opened the sketchbook to the last page. A fresh drawing. Toby and Mia sitting beneath a large tree with the words "You make me brave" written in bold purple crayon beneath it. Toby stared at the image for a long time before gently lying down beside it, his nose resting against the corner of the paper. The man blinked quickly and stood. "She asked me to bring you something else," he said. From his coat pocket, he pulled out a small, green bandana. Mia's. He laid it gently near Toby's paw. "She wanted you to know she's thinking of you." Toby didn't move again, not for a long while. The man eventually left, glancing back over his shoulder. What he saw stayed with him forever. A dog, broken but healing, lying beside a backpack. And a bandana, his eyes closed not in sleep but in something close to trust. That night, for the first time since the fire, Toby didn't sleep on the porch. He slept near the sidewalk, his head nestled against Mia's backpack. The neighbors watched from behind curtains, their hearts full and aching. The next few days, Toby continued to wait. The weather changed again. Soft rain fell one morning, and a thin fog rolled through the streets. But Toby remained, wrapped in the scent of a little girl who had somehow cracked open the walls of his grief. He didn't eat much. He barely moved. His ears drooped, but he stayed. Then, one Monday morning, everything changed. The sun had just begun to rise when a pair of sneakers appeared around the corner. The red backpack bounced with every step. Mia was back. Her face was pale, her breath still shallow, but her eyes shone bright with excitement. Toby lifted his head slowly, disbelieving. He stood wobbly at first, then moved toward her with urgency he hadn't shown in months. Mia dropped her backpack and knelt as he reached her. He didn't hesitate. He buried his head into her arms, whimpering low and long, the sound cracking. Through the early morning silence like thunder, Mia sobbed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "I told them I had to come see you first. I had to." Toby licked her cheek. Once, twice, then again. Not just the soft licks of greeting, but the frantic, relieved licks of a soul that had been holding its breath for days. People across the street stopped to watch. Even a passing car slowed. No one said a word. No one dared. Mia opened her sketchbook with trembling hands. She had drawn a new picture. This time, it was of her and Toby standing in front of a brand new house. A sign in the yard read, "Home." She held it up to him and smiled. "Would you come with me, if I asked?" Toby stared at the drawing, then back at her. Slowly, he rested his paw on the page. Mia laughed through her tears. "Okay," she said softly. "Then we'll tell Dad." Later that week, Toby left the ruins. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't without hesitation. But he followed Mia step by step, with ears up and tail wagging just slightly. Her father stood by the car, the door open. "You sure about this, Mia?" Mia nodded. "He's ready." And Toby, the dog once frozen in grief, climbed inside. The house at 47 Linden Avenue didn't look like much from the outside, just a modest single-story home with light blue siding, a squeaky screen door, and a small front yard with patches of stubborn weeds. But to Toby, it might as well have been a castle. After so many weeks of sleeping beside ashes and broken bricks, the simple sound of a closing door, the scent of clean linen, and the soft warmth of carpet beneath his paws felt almost like stepping into a forgotten dream. Mia held the door open wide for him that first afternoon, her eyes watching his every move, heart pounding in her chest like it might break. "Come in," she whispered, as if she didn't want to scare the moment away. And Toby, the dog who had guarded death, grief, and memory like a soldier, stepped inside. At first, he was cautious. His paws moved slowly, nose twitching at the unfamiliar scents. Furniture that didn't smell like fire, walls that weren't covered in soot, and a kitchen that hummed with quiet life instead of silence. He took it all in: the family photos, the faint scent of tomato sauce from the night before, and the sound of Mia's laughter echoing softly from the hallway. He didn't wag his tail wildly or bark with excitement. Instead, he wandered slowly, reverently, like someone walking through a sacred place. Mia had prepared a space for him in her room, an old dog bed from a local shelter, some toys, and a blanket she'd kept from the hospital. She had written his name in block letters on a small chalkboard above his bed. Toby, not Ash, not the burned house dog, not the ghost of sorrow. Just Toby, whole, real, loved. That night, something incredible happened. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the sky melted into stars, Mia lay curled up on her bed, sketchbook open beside her. Toby had settled near her feet, his head resting on the edge of the mattress. She hummed softly as she colored, nothing special, just a made-up tune she used to sing to herself as a baby. Her dad peeked in at one point, smiling to himself at the sight, then quietly backed away. Around midnight, Mia stirred from sleep. A low whimper had pulled her from her dreams. At first, she thought she'd imagined it, but then it came again, a soft, broken cry. She sat up quickly and looked down. Toby was trembling. His paws twitched, ears pinned back, breath ragged. He was dreaming, or more likely, remembering. The fire, the fear, the family he couldn't save. "Toby," Mia whispered, gently reaching her hand down. "It's okay, I'm here." Her fingers brushed his fur. He jerked at first, then stilled. Slowly, his eyes opened, cloudy with something that looked like pain. But as he focused on her face, his breathing slowed. He blinked once, then twice, and let out a long, tired sigh before nudging his head into her hand. The nightmares came less often. In the following weeks, Toby began to change in ways even Mia hadn't imagined. He gained weight, his ribs no longer pressed sharply through his sides. His coat began to glow again, shedding the layer of soot that had seemed permanent. His limp, while still present, grew less pronounced with the help of short walks and gentle massages from Mia's dad, who had grown fond of the quiet golden dog who followed his daughter like a shadow. They visited the vet together, got updated vaccinations, bought a collar. It was green, with a little silver tag that simply read, Toby. Loved. Still, the journey wasn't without its stumbles. Sometimes, when the fireplace crackled too loudly or someone dropped a dish, Toby would freeze, eyes wide, tail tucked. Mia learned to speak gently in those moments, using soft tones and drawing pictures to calm him. She once made an entire comic strip of Super Toby, a heroic dog who saved a village from a fire and was celebrated by the world. She left it taped to the fridge. Toby would stare at it sometimes as if he knew. Then came the moment that marked the real shift. The day Toby barked again. It was a rainy afternoon. Mia had just come home from school and was walking up the driveway when a neighbor's large retriever came bounding over, barking excitedly. Mia tripped, startled, and dropped her umbrella. Toby, watching from the window, launched forward. By the time the door was opened, he had bolted outside, barking not in panic, but in defense. He placed himself between Mia and the other dog. Low and steady, tail stiff. It only lasted a moment. The neighbor came running, apologizing profusely, and the other dog was friendly, just overzealous. But what mattered most wasn't what happened. It was that Toby barked. He had found his voice again. That night, Mia wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "You're not just guarding ashes anymore, are you?" Toby licked her chin and pressed his nose into her shoulder. News traveled fast in the small town. The dog who had once slept in ruins now slept in a little girl's arms. The same people who once walked quietly past the burned house now stopped to wave at Toby when they saw him in the front yard, sniffing the breeze or dozing in a patch of sun. Some brought treats. Others brought tears. A few left handwritten notes in the mailbox. He deserved a second chance. Thank you for loving him. He helped us heal too. Then came the final visit. It was a warm Saturday morning when Mia's dad drove them back to Marrow Street. The city had finally sent demolition crews. The house would be cleared soon. Mia wanted to go one last time to say goodbye. Toby sat in the back seat, quiet, ears alert. When they arrived, he stepped out slowly. The street was eerily quiet. The ruins looked smaller now, as if grief had shrunk them over time. Toby approached the edge of the porch. He didn't whine. He didn't sit. He simply stood there, tail still, body calm. Mia came beside him, kneeling as she pulled something from her backpack. It was a final drawing, one of him, with two little girls, Lily and Mia, holding his paws. And above them, a simple phrase, "Love doesn't burn." She placed the drawing in the soil near the porch. Then she stood and turned to Toby, ready to go home. Toby looked up at her. And this time, without hesitation, he followed.